Hello, and welcome to another episode of Single Window. So, I'm gonna start this off by saying I apologize. I lied to you. I said we were kind of done with all that stuff, but I wanted to give one more example, just because this may be just a little more contemporary example, and is one that really kind of tries to make it obvious about this stuff. So, we're going to talk about the Matrix, 1997 to 2003. Uh, Fantastic series. I think it's probably the best. Okay, so number one, number two are good on all fronts. Number three, I feel like the acting kind of took a little bit of a nosedive, and the storytelling did a bit. But the first two are incredible, and the message is still there on the third. But I think it's just the execution a little bit. Anyway, it's not a critical analysis of the Matrix, but more about their overall message. So, in the second one, we get introduced to this guy. Well, we're supposed to meet him in the first one, actually, but they cut it. So, this guy was the architect, and he was the constructor of the Matrix. He was this logic bound entity that was supposed to make this. And they talked about it before that the first Matrix he built was perfect. It was mathematical precision, and people rejected it. Or the people that were in the system rejected it. I'm going to assume that you've seen this already, but I guess I'm talking about it like you've already seen it. But a very quick overview is there's a machine world where AI is basically taking over the world, and people are being used as batteries where their brains have been kind of unplugged from this or unplugged from reality and put into a computer generated world. And he is the one that built it, one of the people that built it. And he, like I say, is this mathematical, very logic bound, perfect kind of oriented person. So perfection oriented, I guess. But I don't know if that's necessarily something that we've talked about before as being in that field. But as you can probably ascertain, this is the square side, right? So he gave the boundaries of the system, but it was really again, there was the lady that was following the whole time, and this is one of the pictures that was her. The third episode, she looked different, but she was obviously the other side. So she could see into the future. She's the one that told everybody what was going to happen. And she told them what was the future, but they still had to choose. So they still had that choice. So we'll get back to that in a second. So remember what I was saying about the choice thing being the sort of pursuing one thing or pursuing everything else. And that's kind of what the story kind of alluded to as well. Again, this sort of system of orienting yourself to the vertical is orienting yourself towards, and in this one, it was called the One. So Neo was the main character, which you can kind of see him on the little screen in the corner here. But Neo was the One. So in what we've talked about, this would be the triangle, right? The One. Heading towards that one entity. And everything below here is sort of like we were given the analogy with the moth. These are just things that distract you. They just go nowhere down here. But anyway, there's those two sides. And we see it again in this one as well. And a telling sort of statement she gave in the third one. So these two eventually meet at the very end and then kind of come to an agreement about how they're going to exist together. So she's supporting the people, kind of, and he's supporting just the machine world that's running on the system where they're taking advantage of the people. So they're kind of contravening. So I would say that this side, like we were talking about before, we had one of the brother Karamazov. The one that was on this side is pointing downwards. And then the one on this side is pointing upwards, which is her. She's pointing towards going back to the One, and the One being Neo. And this is sort of the symbolism related to Christianity too, but we won't get into that. So the the quote that I alluded to, and I'm sorry I do this, I talk about something and I get off on some other track. But the quote that I was going to say is she was explaining at the very end, and she was saying he only understands uh, numbers, and he only understands, he's just trying to balance equations. So all the world, he's just trying to balance these equations, trying to make things the way that they make sense. And we kind of think of this as conservatism too, right? But he's trying to keep things that, well, not really keep it in the way, but he's just trying to be mathematically precise. And then at some point, she's like, he's just trying to balance the equation. And he says, well, what are you trying to do? And she's like, unbalance it. So with these two sides, we kind of get the idea of this. And some of you may be aware of this, but this is, some people call it pi. Not pi, but phi, sorry. This is an ancient sort of, I think they call it the golden ratio. A lot of people call it. But you can see that it starts, a lot of time when they show it, they start with these little squares here. And then they, from there, build two together, makes one larger square. And then that's larger square. If you put them both together, you make another bigger square. And you go, and you can kind of see how this is a process of like creation. And this is like the two creating at the same time, giving both of their input into it. And that's kind of what they were saying in the Matrix. Again, maybe I'm going too far. But to me, this is what it means. And this really reminds me of some of these things that they've shown of in physics about how the world is constructed of these sort of bundled layers that work in concert with each other. So we have the one, this is supposed to be a line of basically time, which is, well, it's supposed to be just representing infinity. This just kind of goes, this two-dimensional line goes all the way through it, or what we're perceiving as two-dimensional. To me, this is kind of like this, is the circle in the center. So this is where time doesn't really exist, and this is that sort of string that goes all the way through. These different nested realities, I relate to this. And we might talk about that a little bit more in the future. I'm kind of hesitant to get into this because there's so many people that are so adamant about it. And if I make any mistake, I'll be jumped on like crazy. But I do know quite a bit about it. And we will talk about it more. But for now, we'll just kind of keep it as an idea so that these sort of dimensionally fold onto themselves. And we're talking about many dimensions here, but this would make sense if we think about it back to where we were talking about of these two creator principles that sort of work together in the physical world, the three-dimensional world we see. So, interesting ideas. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully I'll talk to you soon. Alrighty, bye-bye.